Hey guys, I'm the Film Fan, and welcome back to another video. This weekend, Black Widow came out on Disney Plus, Premier Access, and in theaters. And now we have 24 MCU movies, and today I'm going to be ranking all of them, including Black Widow. And the MCU is probably my favorite movie franchise, just personally speaking. It's super consistent in quality, and they've been doing super well for a while now. And I've enjoyed these movies quite a bit. And this is a hard list to do because so many of them are about tied for me. But I'll do my best. So, without further ado, before we get started, actually, what is your list, or what's your favorite one? As I fix my hair too. Is there any of them that you were not crazy about? As for this list, is there anything you disagree with on here? Anything you do agree with on here? Let me know. Without further ado, let's get started. And coming in at number 24, at the bottom, is, unsurprisingly, Thor the Dark World. And this isn't a terrible movie, but it's also not good, really, at all. It's super forgettable, really boring. There's pretty much nothing that happens in this movie. Nothing about the style really works and how it meshes together. The villain is probably the blandest creation in any comic book movie. And I don't think the romance works that well in this movie. It feels very forced here, and then, I don't know. I think we can all agree this is one of the weaker MCU movies. It's competently made, but there's just really nothing here at all. And so it's something, it's just not really worth rewatching ever. So yeah, it comes in at the bottom for me. Coming in at number 23 is Thor the Dark World. Did I just call it Thor the Dark World? It's about as memorable as Thor the Dark World, too. Coming in at number 23 is The Incredible Hulk. And The Incredible Hulk is an interesting creation. It's the only MCU movie that I had not seen until I started rewatching all the Marvel movies in preparation for making this video. So I checked it out finally, and it's one where I really didn't get invested in any of the characters at all, and so I was okay. And it's very poorly edited as well. At times, I thought the Hulk was eating people, even though obviously the Hulk doesn't eat people. I thought that was happening at times because of how some scenes are put together in the editing room. And so I was very confused for a portion of time. And this movie just really has nothing to do with the rest of the franchise. It's dissimilar in tone, dissimilar in any sort of plotline at all, and it doesn't even have the same actor playing Bruce Banner. So it's just, I guess what puts it above Thor the Dark World just barely for me is that the final battle is kind of cool, but it's not great. This is not a good movie. And coming in at number 22 is Iron Man 2. And this is a frustrating movie because there are a lot of things that I do really like about it. This has a really good introduction for Black Widow. I really like Don Cheadle as Rhodey. Justin Hammer is a great villain in this movie. And so there's quite a few, and the humor lands pretty well as well. So there's some really good things about this movie. But it feels like they took 10 different ideas for like a trilogy of Iron Man movies and just said, hey, let's take all of these and make them into one singular movie, one single Iron Man 2. And so it just feels way too overstuffed with plot lines, and none of them get any time to develop, really. And the villain isn't all that good either. Justin Hammer is good, but Whiplash, or I think that's his name, the guy with the electric whips or something, he's really forgettable and boring. So I didn't really like that one. And so, and there's a lot of just Tony getting drunken at a party. There's just a lot of stuff. This is never really a movie that I've liked all that much. It's not, I don't know if I'd call it bad. I don't know if I'd call it good either. It's right there in the middle for me, at least. And it's towards the bottom for the MCU. So, yeah, that's my thoughts on the movie. If you have any defenses for this one, though, I'd love to hear them in the comments. Coming in at number 21 is Thor. And from here on out, I like all of these movies. I like them enough, at the very least. So, from Thor to the top movie, 21 and on, I like these movies. So, Thor is okay. The characters are okay. The romance is okay. The story is okay. The writing is okay. And yeah, this movie is pretty okay. So, as you can tell, there's really not much to say about this one. It's one of the growing pains of the MCU. This is when they're still working out what they're good at, what they're not good at. And so this is just a small creation that they made to set up the character of Thor, and it works well enough as that, but it's really not much more than that. And I don't really feel like I ever want to rewatch this movie unless I'm doing like an MCU marathon. As there's just really nothing to come back to. Coming in at number 20 is Captain Marvel. And a lot of people will have this at the very bottom. Me, I kind of liked this movie a little bit. Nick Fury de-aged the entire movie. Samuel L. Jackson in 90s mode is really good. There are some cool action sequences. I love the whole 90s aesthetic of the entire movie. And there's some good performances. But the biggest problem for me is I just never really... The lead character, Captain Marvel herself, she's written to be very reserved, and there's a ton of things just all adding up to her being this very reserved character, and so you always feel kind of an arm's length away from her. And so, while Brie Larson does her absolute best, whether you love her or hate her, she's a talented actress. I think she won an Oscar. She does her best with this character, but there's really not enough there. And so this movie, and I also think it's super predictable with the whole villain plotline and all that. I saw that coming like a mile away, and so it plays it off as this big reveal that you see it coming like super long way. So it's okay. I like this movie a lot more than most people, but it's not really anything special among the MCU. Coming in at number 19 is Avengers Age of Ultron. And this is a bit of a frustrating one because I feel like this has everything that worked so well about the first Avengers movie, but it tried to capture lightning in a bottle twice, and what it doesn't manage to capture from that lightning is the fantastic story structure and plotline balancing. And this movie just feels kind of like a hot mess. there's so much going on, so many villain things, so many quests going around. It's probably the most confusing MCU movie, and there's so much going on with this one. It's a little bit jumbled. Even though I do like this movie quite a bit, it has the same group dynamic with the Avengers, the really good action. This movie has some really good cinematography and something. I can link a video from Filmento that goes into that. It's really good when it comes to that. So, yeah, I like this movie, but I don't really love it as much as I hope I would. Coming in at number 18 is Iron Man 3. And this is another one where I feel like I like it more than most people. I think it has some good directing from Shane Black. And the way he writes his dialogue, it really fits with Tony Stark. And I really like the mission and the character stuff with Tony Stark in this movie. I also don't really care that much for the villain plot line, or really just, it feels like a lot of recycled Iron Man ideas. This feels like exactly what you'd expect an Iron Man sequel to be. It doesn't really do much interesting or different. So I like this movie a good enough amount. I don't know if I necessarily love it. However, I do want to defend one thing. I actually really like the Mandarin twist in this movie. I think it's clever and funny, and I guess it helps I don't really have that much connection to the character of the Mandarin, but I thought it was really well done in this movie, and it's one of its strongest things it does. So there's hot take of the day. Coming in at number 17 is Ant-Man. And it's pretty good. Everything from here on, like some of the stuff below this, I find a little bit good, but frustrating, and then some of the weaker stuff. Everything from here on out, I really like. So, Ant-Man, even though it's 17 on this list, it's really good. It's a sort of fun heist movie inside of the MCU. Paul Rudd is fantastic as Scott in this. You have Michael Pena in this as well, who's awesome. Michael Douglas, Evangeline Lilly. Everyone is really good in this movie. I like that it's a little bit smaller scale in comparison to the rest of the franchise. That's also kind of what hurts it, is that it doesn't really connect much of anything at all. And it's just kind of, when you come off of Age of Ultron. But, yeah, it's a nice movie. The thing is, I always feel like I'll watch this movie, and then I'll really love it, and then after a few days, it just kind of goes back to being, it's good. And then I'll watch it again, and I'll love it, and then it goes back to, it's good. It's kind of that movie that ages worse with you, but then when you watch it again, it just gets better and goes back. So maybe if I were to watch this again tomorrow or something, it would shoot up to, like, number 12 or something. So yeah, there's my take on Ant-Man. Coming in at number 16 is Black Widow, the newest MCU movie. And this is kind of frustrating in the sense that this movie was made way too late. I don't really understand why they decided to make the first Phase 4 MCU movie a Black Widow prequel set after Civil War, when we had an entire Phase 3 dedicated to movies like that were well past. But we got this movie, and I'm glad we finally have it. The standouts are Florence Pugh and David Harbour. They're both so good in this. The action is really well done, and it has a bit of a more serious tone. It's a little bit darker than most MCU movies. I appreciated that about it, that it was somewhat different in that regard. And so I liked Black Widow quite a bit. The most disappointing part was Taskmaster. I thought he was, or if you, I guess I'll let some spoilers in this video since you've seen all these movies if you're watching this video. She's kind of bland in this movie. There's not much to Taskmaster, but other than that, I really liked Black Widow. And it's a good send-off for Scarlett Johansson in the MCU. Coming in at number 15, AntMan and the Wasp. And most people will probably have this one a lot lower, but for me personally, I really dig this one. It's one of the funniest MCU movies. It's, for me at least, probably one of the most rewatchable ones. It has just enough heart to it, and it stands out a little bit more than the previous Ant-Man films. This one just goes all out, kind of, with the crazy Ant-Man scenarios you can do with, like, throwing inflated Hello Kitty stick things at motorcycles, shrinking buildings. This movie just kind of goes bonkers, and I appreciate it for that. It's definitely not great, but it's quite a lot of fun. And so, yeah, that's why it's a little bit higher than most people probably have it. Coming in at number 14 is Captain America, the First Avenger, and this is just a really cool sort of World War II superhero movie. The main actual plot line I'm not as crazy about, but just everything with the characters, with the storyline of this one, I really dig. With Steve Rogers being recruited in and being the best man he can be and all of it, I think it works super well. And it's a really good start to the Captain America trilogy. This one, I don't think people talk about this one as much. I think it deserves a little bit more love than it gets. I think it's a really, really good movie. Coming in at number 13 is Doctor Strange. I clicked too early, whatever. And what makes this movie most interesting is just the crazy, bonkers visual style of it, where you have the sort of Inception thing going on with the mirror world and whatnot. And you have all this really cool world building with the Sorcerer Supreme and Dormammu and all that, all the Tibet, all, just everything with all that is really cool. This has probably some of the best effects in any Marvel movie. I think it won the Oscar for best visual effects or something like that. And I think it's super well done in this movie. And I really like the character of Stephen Strange. But I think what's holding this movie back just a bit is it's sort of a formulaic MCU movie. It kind of has a pretty basic story, but overall I think it works well enough. Coming in at number 12 is Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. And I personally love the Guardians of the Galaxy movie. I know some people are not too crazy about this one, whereas some people absolutely love this and think it's one of the best MCU movies. I'm not in either camp. I think this is... Why is it lagging so much? I think this is a great Guardians of the Galaxy movie. It takes everything that worked about the first movie, the heart, the humor, the fun. It just takes it up to the next level, and it's really, really solid, and it has some really strong emotional moments, and it might actually be funnier than the previous movie. Now, one thing this movie does is it splits up the team, and probably my favorite thing about the original movie was the team dynamic and how they play off of each other so well. And so by taking away that from the movie, I think that hurts it a little bit, even though it was necessary for the story they're telling. It does hurt it just a tiny bit, but overall I still think this movie works a really good amount. And this is both super underrated and super overrated. I don't know. Either way, this is a really good movie. Coming in at number 11 is SpiderMan Homecoming. And this is a movie that I don't think I gave enough credit to it before, of just being a really, really well done Spider-Man movie inside of the MCU. And while I'm not crazy about how they integrate some of the MCU stuff into it, this just gives a creative look at how the MCU, the world with the Avengers and whatnot, would be viewed at from teenagers. And it has all of the right character stuff that you hope for from a Spider-Man story. It has one of the best MCU villains with Michael Keaton's character, the Vulture. And I just think it's super great at what it's trying to do. And I don't think, before I wasn't too crazy about this movie, I don't think it jumped up when I was looking at this list. This one deserves to be a little bit higher. So yeah, this is a good one. Coming in at number 10 is Thor Ragnarok. And this is probably the most bonkers, insane, and hilarious MCU movie. For both better and for worse. This is one of the most stylized and energetic MCU movies, or really comic book movies ever. And it's so much fun to watch. Taika Waititi is a legend. If you disagree. If you disagree, you're objectively wrong. And yeah, he does an awesome job with this movie. And Hela is really good in this one too. She's probably one of the better MCU villains, thanks to Cate Blanchett, and it has a lot of heart to it. I don't think we often realize how much it has, and that's because one thing this movie does do a little bit too much of is, even though it's so unbelievably funny, it's a little too funny because sometimes the humor kind of undercuts some of the character moments, as this movie just tries to go all out insane. And sometimes I wish it would have held back a little bit to let the movie play, but we still have one of the most exciting MCU movies yet. This is a really good one. Coming in at number 9 is Black Panther. And this is another one that I didn't initially give enough credit to, but when I rewatched it for the sake of this video, I appreciated it a lot more. It's the thematically richest of the franchise, as a lot of powerful ideas, a lot of really strong emotion. It has some beautiful cinematography. It had some great performances, and it deals on a lot of very topical issues. And so, I think that's why it started to get into the Oscar conversation, too. And I think, does it deserve a Best Picture nomination? Maybe not. But this is still a really great MCU movie that is probably the most cinematic of them all, probably. And I really appreciate this one. It's also a little bit hard to not acknowledge now, is Chadwick Boseman. He does a phenomenal job in this movie, and it's kind of heartbreaking to look back at this now, after his tragic passing. So yeah, that's Black Panther. Coming in at number 8 is Spider-Man Far From Home. Now, most people will probably look at me and say I'm insane for having this movie in the top 10 and above, like Black Panther and stuff. And maybe I am, but I just think this did such a good job with the Spider-Man character and the character storyline with Peter Parker and MJ. And it's, I think, the best that's been done with that since Spider-Man 2 in live action. So not including like Spider-Verse or anything like that. It's where the human side of the story feels more real than most MCU movies. It's a bit more relatable. It's with exactly the kind of thing that Peter Parker would be going through after Endgame and after the passing of Tony Stark. It's a very troubling situation for him, and this movie goes really deep into that. and I think it creates for one of the better emotional storylines in the MCU. And especially everything they do with Mysterio is genius, even if it is kind of predictable. What they actually do with it is really good. And I think MJ is a massive upgrade from that one lady from the first movie. She just has a bit more personality. And overall, I just think this movie works super well. It's probably my biggest unpopular opinion about the MCU, but I think Spider-Man Far From Home is one of the best. And coming in at number 7 is Captain America: The Winter Soldier. And coming in the opposite spectrum, I think this movie is a slight bit overrated. I was in conversation with this yesterday, that this movie, I think it's a tiny bit overhyped. Best comic book movie of all time? Not for me, at least. It just doesn't really resonate a ton with me. And so, I don't know if it really is insane on that level, but of course, it's still a fantastic movie and one of the MCU's best. It's more of a spy thriller. The character with Captain America, what he goes through, everything with S.H.I.E.L.D. Black Widow was a great addition to this movie. The Winter Soldier himself, his storyline with Bucky, it's continued really well from first Avenger. The action is some of the best in the franchise. It has a bit more of a punch to it. And so, really, I think this is one of the best MCU movies, even if I don't think it's one of the very, very best. That's it. On a list of 24 movies with at least 21 of them being good, this is a great movie. It deserves being this high on the list. Coming in at number 6 is Iron Man. The original one that kicked it off, and it's still one of the best. And it tells such a fantastic story with Tony Stark, and I don't know if they've really topped it's a little bit smaller scale in comparison to the rest of the franchise, but I don't think that really affects it much at all. I think it's a really great introduction to this franchise. One thing, it has some of the best action in the MCU. It's such a good kickoff, and I guess my biggest problem with this movie is Obadiah Stane. I just don't think he's that good of a villain, but I still think this is a really solid movie, and I'm glad that it's held up as well as it has. Coming in at number 5 is The Avengers, and this is still one of the best structured, best put together comic book movies of all time. In that, the group dynamic is insane. All the banter between them is really great. That's what Joss Whedon as a director is probably best at, is the banter between characters. And so this movie does a really good job at that. And it's just so revolutionary for the genre and what it was able to do, combining all these characters together and successfully making this great team-up movie. But before then, I don't think there was really anything done like this, at least this big, and so it was pulled off super well, and it still holds up even after the director of this movie is not so great. Coming in at number 4 is Guardians of the Galaxy, and this is one of the most personality-filled MCU films ever. Really personality-filled films ever. There's just such a great energy to it. And it's such a weird movie, but such a weirdly great one. And how it combines all these super odd elements, these super odd characters, puts them together, and it just all plays off each other. With the characters and just every element of this movie. It all comes together so well. And really the only thing I could say I'm not a fan of is the villain, Ronan. But other than that, this is an MCU movie that's just, it's so much fun, has a lot of really good emotion to it. You'd think you wouldn't get emotional over seeing a big tree saying, "We are Groot," but it's a really well done movie, and I also love the soundtrack to it too. So that's another thing. Before we get to the top 3, let me know if you're still watching this movie. What is your favorite MCU movie? If you could subscribe, I'd appreciate that. Comment what you'd like to see me cover next. Like the video, and with that, let's get straight back to the list. Bringing us into the top 3, so the Bronze Medal Award. Bronze, whatever. Coming in at number 3 is Captain America Civil War. And I think few MCU movies have just been able to capture the raw emotional power that comes from just these characters that we've grown to love, put in a situation where they have to tear each other apart. It's just such a heartbreaking one to watch, of these characters you love so much and want to see fighting together and strong, and you go through seeing them slowly divide, and how everything the rest of the MCU has done falls apart for them. And so it's a little bit more serious of an MCU movie, but I think that also goes in its favor, and it works super well. It's also a nice introduction for Black Panther and Spider-Man, and especially the final moments of this movie, it works on an insanely well level. So I'm glad this one is as good as it is. I initially was considering this movie for number 1, it's just the other 2 are so, you know what those 2 are. So let's move on to our runner-up. So the Silver Award for MCU Movies Best, Avengers Endgame. And for a while, this was the highest grossing movie ever made. This was a massive crowd-pleasing event that everyone wanted to see, and it's just such a gigantic movie, and it all comes together. It's the culmination of 23 movies, 11 years of hard work to create this massive payoff of a movie, and it all feels entirely earned. There's nothing it messed up on severely. I think it shows you what hard work can lead to. You create this movie resonates a ton. It's funny, has some really cool action, especially in that third act. The third act is one of the best third acts in any movie, just how much satisfaction there is coming from it. And the only things I can say, for a while this was one of my favorite movies ever. I wouldn't say that anymore, but this is still, just saying that, that's a lot going for it. But, I guess the only negative things I can say are I think it misused a couple of characters, mostly Thanos, but especially Hulk too. I think those 2 characters weren't properly used, but other than that, this was a fantastic, fantastic movie. But coming in at number 1, if you're still watching this, is Infinity War. And this is my favorite Marvel movie. And just, it's everything that worked about Endgame as well, but I think this movie is just a little bit more tightly made, a little bit more powerful character-wise. I just think this movie is slightly more well put together. The big thing going for it is Thanos, who's probably the best MCU villain, and he's someone who you obviously don't agree with. You're not, unless you're Bill Gates, you're not intending for mass genocide. But you can also understand why he is the way he is and why he wants to do what he wants to do. And so he's a really well crafted villain. And there are like 60 characters in this movie. All of them have their moment to shine. Nobody's gone to waste. It's super well structured. It's insanely well paced. It has an ending that's super emotional. Even if you know they're all going to come back, that you have to admit the dusting moment was still shocking when you saw it in theaters. And so this movie is easily one of the best comic book movies of all time, and easily the best MCU movie, maybe the best Marvel movie. And so it's my favorite of the franchise, so it comes in at number 1. If you watch this to the end, which I'd be very surprised if you did, but thank you. If you could subscribe to this channel, The Film Fan, I'd love if you could. Like this video if you enjoyed it. Let me know. Did you agree with this list? Did you disagree with it? What were your thoughts? If you could follow me on Letterboxd, that would be nice. I'll see you guys next time. Peace!